your success is our success. You know, if we can make you successful, our whole city will benefit. Between her, risk and growth are two sides of the same coin. You want growth, you're going to have risk. If you don't want any risk, you're not going to have growth. So one of the things I coined very early in terms of a strategy was the 3 R's, and it's about reputation, relationships, and relevance. If you go into leadership, you're not about helping people to be their best selves. You're not actually in leadership. You're just a manager.
You're listening to Beyond Growth with Rayan Fernando.
Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for coming on and having a chat.
No problems.
Really excited to dig into, I'm going to say all things Geelong, because I feel like that's a hell of a topic and we could probably spend a good amount of time on that one. But before we go down that path, you're laughing because I know how long we could spend talking about Geelong. But yeah, you've got an amazing background and sort of work history and experience, and I'd love to just hear about where the journey began for you.
Look, it's a very long journey. It's interesting. I grew up. My parents were Salvation Army officers, so we moved around all the time. So I was born in Bairnsdale in Gippsland. My sister was born in Geelong, back at the old Baxter House, and then we moved to Rhodesia to be missionaries, which is probably not the right word these days, but at the same time we were over there, and I remember a little bit of it. I was very young, but then we grew up through Conniva, Horsham, Ballarat, around the Wimmera, went to Whyalla as well, and then moved to about the start of my high school. Came to Melbourne, so we spent. I probably spent 10 years in Melbourne, and so that time I was in the Salvation Army. I was in I was part of a fairly big organisation. Very musical. Loved my music. I played trombone, and I loved doing that. Managed to go on a couple of international trips, band tours, and all over the country as well. So had a great time doing that, and of course met my wife, my now wife at the time, she was my girlfriend, and she'd moved down to Geelong. She was about to move down to Geelong, so I decided, well, let's do that. So I moved in with her brother, and then about a year later we got married, and we've never left. So it's been about 30 years there. But in terms of a career, it's been a really interesting one because of the fact that I'm a late diagnosed ADHD, and the realization that actually there was when you're with ADHD, there's a lot of bit of shiny thing. It's like, hey, we're talking squirrel. So, being static in a role was something I didn't realize was a bit of a byproduct of that, but it gave me a really interesting and odd mix of skills. I mean, I ran my own graphic design business for a couple of times, but I tried to do that. Although my dad paid my bills and my sister paid my rent, so I wouldn't say it was a great success, but it certainly gives you a skill base and a learning. And went and was in insurance, selling industrial cable, all sorts of different things like that. And then I started working I worked at RMIT in their commercial arm as well for a bit, and just did a lot of different things. Managed to find my way into the point where I was a youth worker with the Salvos, running an international conference at Deakin University, and it was in youth work there. And then I worked at my church at one point as well, building a media and communications team. There were 2 volunteers when I started. By the time I left, I had 55 volunteers in my team. Awesome. You learn about leadership when you work with volunteers, because there is nothing else to keep someone there apart from your ability to keep them there. You can't just pay them more. Yeah. Or you can't pay them. So that was interesting. But, I ended up in politics as well. I ran had a couple of stints in politics with a federal senator, ended up running the campaign in 2010, then went into a small consulting firm around government grants. So travelling all over Australia, trying to explain government to business and business to government, which is kind of one of those never-ending things that never gets kind of solved as such. And that's fine on both. That's both annoying and also expected to some extent. But that led me into, I then came home and worked at NDIS for a while, but I got a call from someone at KPMG who I'd known and said, we're opening an office in Geelong. Would you, come work for us? I was like, sure. And so I'm just over 4 years now into my time at KPMG, and it basically started the office. The first office was my back bedroom and my car, and a number of cafes around Geelong, which is, and it's been a fantastic experience. And we've got a fantastic team, some great partners now, and a growing team. It's been really interesting to watch it from me running around, not knowing what I'm going to do, to having almost 30 staff locally in an amazing office with some really smart people and some great young guys as well. So it's been a really interesting journey for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was sort of prepping for the podcast, and there was so many things we could talk about. Yeah. And that sort of that sort of wealth of knowledge you built up over the years, I mean, certainly paying off now. I just want to touch on kicking off KPMG and being that first employee in Geelong, and having that big name like KPMG come to Geelong. What was that like? What was those early days like? Like you said, working your house, a lot of, as people like to call it, the coffers, the cafes, which are, like that. But
well, my expense report is funny. I was looking back at my expense reports the other day, and it's just like cafe. It's all like $10.50s, which is me buying a coffee for someone. Look, it was really interesting because, and look, KPMG had established a number of regional offices. So we have offices in Newcastle, in Wollongong. I think was the first one. Gold Coast. Some call Parramatta a regional office, but I don't really think it is. But Townsville was established about the same time as that, but that was a bit different. But it was a really interesting. And look, I've been I was in the Melbourne space and working in Melbourne, as many Geelong people would understand. Spend a fair bit of time in career in Melbourne, working in Melbourne. So I understood the space up there a bit, but I was really trying to reframe the large. And people don't realise how big KPMG is. We've got 250,000 staff globally.
Wow. Okay.
We're like, I think we're in the top 15 employees in Australia. And, we pick some of the best and the brightest. These are not, these are really, really smart people. But establishing an office here was kind of interesting because in Melbourne, it's often a lot more transactional. It's a lot. I mean, it's 5.5 million people up there. We've got 349,000 as of last year. But it was really interesting to start to go, well, how are we going to establish there? How are we going to establish here? How are we going to actually have an impact here? How are we going to understand the market? And while people think about business development a lot, it was much, much more about a market development problem. So how do I, in a sense, foster, create, uncover a market for what we do? There are people that I talk to, and even to some extent today, when I say, I'm from KPMG, and they go, who's that? And I go, we're one of the big four. What's that? Now, naivety is not a bad thing, but it's interesting that, that's a part of a kind of a common lexicon in business circles often, but it kind of hadn't leaked down here because we're the first big four that's properly been here. And so it was interesting to have that conversation about what we can bring. But the key thing that we've really tried to drive at, and, certainly our lead geographic partner, Paul Robson, talks about this a lot in terms of we're a local team. We are a local office. We work with local clients, but we've got a global presence. So I was trying to introduce people to the size, but also the connection that we have, because all business is somewhat local to some extent, or people want to be talking to people they know. And so one of the things I coined very early in terms of a strategy was the 3 R's, and it's about reputation, relationships, and relevance. And so I looked at it as about a 5 year, I'm like 4 years into a 5 year kind of process about establishing us. And, we needed to build a reputation. So look, it helps that KPMG, when I heard KPMG was coming to town, just as a person from Geelong, I thought, wow, someone like KPMG doesn't turn up, and if they haven't done the numbers and they can see the potential or the actual opportunity there. So that gave me, it's like, that sounds great. But you've got to establish a reputation of who you are, and that people need to go, yeah, they're good peoples. I trust that organisation. I trust what they do. The relationships, as we know in Geelong, it's all about relationships. Yeah. We talk about 1 degree of separation. If I don't know them, you probably do. So, I just had 4 conversations on the way in of people that you and I both know, just stopping at the cafe. But that that relationship is really, really key.
Absolutely.
And it's got to be there. And I have joked a bit at the past where if someone really ruins their reputation in a place like Geelong, we'll send you to Melbourne. Off you go. Spend some time there. We'll rehabilitate that. But that relationship is really key. And so once you have a good reputation and you've built those relationships, at that point then you kind of somewhat introduce the relevance argument, which is that, in a sense, that bridge between you and I, where you see that what I offer you is valuable, so we become relevant in that respect. But in a place like Geelong, for me, and I think this, and I'm seeing this in regional cities. I'll say cities because it's not about towns as much, but regional cities around Australia and around the globe, where they talk about the fact that, yeah, I need to know you, I need to trust you. And so then you can have that relevance argument. And so I suppose the thing for me through that process, and look, I've got to say, one of the key partners, our Victorian lead partner, Anthony Chinani, was just a legend. Still love him. He's an auditor. We won't hold that against him, but he's an absolute quality. And he backed me, and the organisation as a whole did. And it was like, okay, how are we going to do this? Okay, so we got involved in different organisations. You need to turn up. You need to be in the room. It's very hard to start to build a relationship with people if you're not in the room. And you need to have something worthwhile to say, and you need to have something that's relevant to them. So that's how you build a relationship. It's the same way you build a relationship anywhere. So it was a really interesting exercise, and it's been fascinating to watch us go from, well, I suppose my back bedroom to then we had a temporary office, and then we moved into our office. It was April 2023, I think now. So, almost 2.5 years now in that office up at the top of the GMHBA building. Great view.
I know. I'm so envious of that view.
I spent a lot of time on the couch having coffee with people. But it's been interesting to see that transition, but also the building of the team. So our lead partner who runs our business tax space, Paul Robson, came in July of 2023. Our lead audit partner, external audit partner, Luke Snowden, came in, I think it was October. He's actually a Geelong boy. He grew up in Drumcondra, played footy with everybody. It's hilarious. And then Claire Richards, who is my partner, I report to her. So, and she's a lifer too, a lifer in KPMG, but a lifer locally as well. So she moved sections and started the advisory section here. And so I was very, very honoured that she said, come and work with me. And I'm like, cool. That's awesome. So we've built that out. We're getting close to 30 staff, which in 2.5 years or so is pretty good growth.
Yeah. And a lot of work.
A lot of work. Yeah.
For those listening and
possibly
saying, who is KPMG? What do they do?
Yep.
And who are the big four?
Yep.
Like you said that, and I'm like, you know what? It's probably worth touching on. So like, what does KPMG do?
So KPMG is one of, as I said, the big four professional services firms in the world. Okay, there's a commonly seen as a big four. But we are seen often traditionally as an accounting firm. And certainly that's one of the core things that we do. We have a tax advisory and business advisory service around the taxation side of things. Our audit team, obviously, they do a lot around that type of space, external audits and that type of thing. So we have a big arm doing that. We also have a whole lot of other things that we do. So I'm in the advisory team. We do things like risk consulting. So we'll walk into people and actually help them understand their risk profiles and help them how to deal with that on a regular basis. We do things like cyber security, some AI. We do business resilience. We've got one of our partners works with people to bring staff over from overseas. It is a full services professional firm. And to some extent, what I do with Claire and our advisory team is, to a large extent, and to a large extent the whole firm, we just help grow businesses. Okay. And look, often we work with, people just think, oh, you just work with the big, really, really big ASX listed firms. But we've got what we call an enterprise section or a mid-market and private section or division. We work with businesses that might only have 5 or 6 staff.
That was going to be my next question, so yeah.
Yeah, we work across the gamut, and we specialise that in Geelong because that's our Geelong market.
It is.
97.5% of businesses in Geelong are under 20 staff. So there's a lot of businesses here that aren't precluded from, we work with them. And it might be with tax stuff. It might be with advisory stuff. It might be around sustainability and understanding ESG. But as I said, we have offices all over Australia, but also all over the world. So if I've got an expert in, say, Denmark, that's an expert in, let's say wind, because I know wind's obviously happening here fairly heavily. We might bring them in to do a consultation to help maybe the port or someone else to get that understanding. So having that level of expertise is massive, but we are fiercely local and fiercely embedded in our ecosystem here, because you talk to any one of those 30, we all love Geelong.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I suppose the benefit of anyone working, any of those sort of small to medium businesses working with you is that'll be your reach, right? So you've got a person with 5 people in the team, but working with KPMG means they're working with a global team. And
we can work with you from when you've got 5 employees to when you're actually listing on the ASX 100. And you hope you can take someone there, but I mean, it's that type of thing that we can bring that expertise, but also give you that expertise from maybe those 5 steps in front of you, because we've got clients in that space. And we can say, I know you're doing that now, but the clients in that next echelon, they're thinking this way. Maybe that's something to consider, and we can help them with that. So it's great to have that pipeline of advisory, and the breadth of advisory too. So, yeah, that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. We help businesses grow.
I like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned how important it was to be in the room.
Yeah.
Right. And showing up. But I think, and what I've seen over the last maybe 2 years is you've gone from being in the room to KPMG creating the room for people to be in. Yeah. Sort of go through the Geelong economic blueprint we work through as well. But you're creating the room to then have those conversations. How did that develop over time? I suppose that was a strategic plan to try and obviously lift Geelong up and move it forward. But I feel like that's played a huge part in the way we're thinking about Geelong. Yeah,
it was interesting when I go back, and I mean, the Geelong economic blueprint was, it's always funny how things start. And I remember Anthony, who I talked about before, and I were in the temporary office on level 1 where I was looking at the Bush Inn and at a window that was broken, that's still broken today. If the Bush Inn is listening, please fix that window. It's still bugging me. Anyway, but we were just talking about, what we could do, and we have an incredible amount of thought leadership that we put together. You kind of name a topic that we've probably got someone who's put some thought leadership into that. And we were talking about this, and I was talking to Anthony about, I really want to have something local, something, economic, something, a blueprint for what we want to do. And amazingly, he just said, well, do it. So it really was that element of when you understand the room you're in, and we were talking about before we got on the show that you when you start to fully understand something or somewhere, you start to see all the little bits on the side that's a bit frayed or doesn't quite look right or doesn't really work. And some people might go, oh, that's not really good. But for those of us that love the place, that's why we love it, because we are a bit sometimes in Geelong, we are sometimes a big country town and act like it sometimes. And it's annoying, but it's like, that's just who we are. But at the same time, it gives you an indication of what we could create. And I think to some extent there's a bit of a responsibility that I know we have as a firm, but also I know I share that personally as well, that with that knowledge, with that experience, and certainly I've had experience nationally and even internationally as well, looking at things, I want to bring that home. I want to bring that thinking home. I want to actually have us, so we have the real, we can change our thinking about where we're at. We're not Sleepy Hollow. We're well and truly past that. But I really think that we wanted to be able to, and it's displaying what we can do as well, but it's also having a responsibility to our home, that we want to make our home better as a firm. And so building something like the Geelong Economic Blueprint, the Geelong Risk Landscape from last year and the upcoming piece, which we're about to publish in the next month or two, is really about saying we love this city, we believe in it, we're here because we believe in it, because we believe that there's benefit and the prosperity to all. And so we take that responsibility pretty, we're very cognizant of that responsibility to be creating those rooms as well as places like the Committee for Geelong, the Chamber of Commerce, and many others. We do that for a purpose, to try and drive people's ability to lift their eyes, to start to see what the potential for them is. And I suppose one of the things, to kind of encapsulate that, one of the things I say to a lot of people when they sit on the couch with me up at our office when we're having a coffee overlooking the bay, is your success is our success. If we can make you successful, our whole city will benefit. Does it benefit me specifically? Maybe. I often say, I help people grow their business, and every now and then hopefully we can invoice them. Then there's a reality to that as well. But it really is about that responsibility we see of, taking care of home.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think I do like that. I know that there is an agency or there is an organisation outside of the political sphere thinking about it that way as well. And like you said, where we spoke off air and in regards to Geelong, and I've been here for 25 years, you've been here for 30 years, right? Yeah. So we've sort of seen Geelong grow over the last 20 plus years, and how much has grown. And I'm generally excited to where it's going, and I've sort of couple of times I'll find myself driving through Geelong, especially like Lara way. I'm driving through Lara and I'm like, where am I? Like it's grown so much, like quite physically, with the amount of people there.
Yes.
So we are growing population, but with that comes challenges,
yes,
but more importantly, opportunities.
Yeah, and I think that they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. We're in one of the things that both Claire and I in our advisory practice and our risk practice do a lot is, and she's an expert in, she's forgotten more about risk consulting than I'll ever learn, I expect. So she's phenomenal in that space and done it with some amazing organisations. But we talk about, between her, risk and growth are two sides of the same coin. You want growth, you're going to have risk. If you don't want any risk, you're not going to have growth. It then becomes how you manage it. And in a city context, it's very much the same. We look at about it, and look, we've been growing faster than anybody except Sunshine Coast. We did overtake them for a little bit there in terms of our growth factor, but you're on average growing by almost 2% a year, which is significant in many places. And so we're going to have those growing pains. Growing pains in every facet of our city, whether it be one of the key things that the businesses told us through a survey we just did for the new piece we're putting out was that the biggest internal challenge to growth for them was access to skilled staff. So you look at that and you go, well, it's not just that. It's okay, well, are we getting people through our education system? Are we providing them the right housing so they can actually live here when we bring staff in? Have we got the right education so that their kids can go to school? There's a multiplicity of factors in there. But you really want to, if we want to pursue that growth, because that's how you create that shared prosperity. It's exciting. It's really exciting. I mean, I like you, I look back at the time when I first came to Geelong and go, geez, we've changed.
Yeah. Things are open on a Sunday, Arvo.
Well, one of my key indicators of success is being able to get a coffee at 3:30 on a weekday in CBD. But it's like anything. I mean, as you grow and evolve, it changes. And I don't think that people talk about, they're scared of change. I think people are scared of the speed of change. And how directly it affects them. But I don't think change is a negative thing. I don't think anybody wants to go back to the fact where they can't go to the shops on a Sunday.
Yeah.
But I think that we want to be in a place where we are conscious of that, but also there are times when we don't want to be governed by the most recalcitrant of our community. But at the same time, it's not even that. It's about, there are some people who don't want change for their own sake, but we need change for all our sakes. Like I say, it's our success we need to look at.
And with that, one thing I sort of always think about is, as much as, I mean, I talk about it and it's great to speak to you about it as well, and I get excited, but I find that it's hard to then see that in other leadership areas in Geelong, other leaders in Geelong. And, specifically, sometimes we talk about the political side of things, and everyone's got an agenda, everyone's got certain things they want to try and achieve. And, with this kind of the blueprint and everything else you're working with, how do you cut through all those different sort of agendas? Because I think that's almost what's held us back, is that these multiple people go with multiple agendas and trying to do good for the city, because it's not, not laser focused as to, okay, this is what we want to do together, which is going to be always hard to do.
Look, I think there's this, we need to realise that we are a pretty big city. We have a lot of different elements to our city. And I talked to it I was talking to someone about our city council the other day, in the sense that our city council has more in common with Queensland councils in its breadth and size and challenges than any other council in Victoria, because in Geelong, we have a CBD, literally a central business district. I mean, not all of it, but obviously that. 3 major hospitals, a major university, a TAFE. We have a refinery, we have an international airport, international port. We have a massive tourism industry. We also got rural and primary producers, all within somewhat of an encapsulated space. So it's a very complex area. So thinking that we can kind of that there is going to be a single voice as such, I don't necessarily think is the most mature thing to think about. One of the things that I was fortunate to do, and I love to do, but I don't really get the opportunity anymore, was to conduct bands and orchestras. When you're conducting, it's a really interesting thing, because I draw the parallel, because as a conductor, you don't get to play any instruments. Your back is to the audience, so people never see your face. And you don't play any of the instruments, you play them all. So I think that in a way, when you're going through as a conductor, at times you'll emphasise part of the orchestra to play in a way to bring them across, because you want that emphasis at that point, but then another time it'll be someone else. So I think there's an element of that within Geelong. I think that if we expect that orchestra is going to stand up and without coordination or collaboration is going to play a perfect piece for Geelong, I think that's not really reasonable. I'm seeing across interviews I'm doing with people around the world, collaboration keeps coming up. The need to get people together, the talk about things like the triple helix model, which is about government, education and business really working together. Places where they have definitive programs to work together. And we've got some of those elements here. Obviously G21 going changes the landscape a little bit. And I think to some extent we get to see how that works out in the long term. But I don't think we can be in a place where we can expect to sing in unison. We need to sing with different voices and different things. But to be able to sing a really good, tuneful song, you do need some sense of that coordination to happen. So.
And how do we...
How do we do that is the question.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing, like, then who's the conductor? I mean, that's the...
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, it's interesting to look at the legacy of Frank Costa. Okay. And obviously Frank's got a statue, which is great to see, because I remember I interviewed Frank Costa when I ran Entrepreneurs Geelong. And Entrepreneurs Geelong was an organisation I ran for about 5 years, where I interviewed local entrepreneurs and just talked to them about their experience, their journey, their failures. And I was incredibly fortunate to interview Frank. And the story started where that statue kind of is, with him selling newspapers. But then what he did is he went and got a bunch of his mates to sell the newspapers for him, and he took a cut. And it's kind of that type of thing. But Frank obviously was pretty pivotal for us. And we talked about the fact that before the show, talked about in 2007 when Geelong first won the grand final, and how that was a really pivotal moment that I saw in the psyche of the town, that, hey, we can actually be winners. We haven't just lost 4 grand finals, and we haven't lost pyramid and all that other stuff that was happening, but we can be winners. And I think that I think that anybody who thinks that, most people would agree that Frank, just to a large extent, saved the football club by his actions, and to some extent had an incredibly outsized influence in the town. So that's an amazing legacy to look back on. But we've got to be careful. And I think even I wouldn't speak to Frank ever, because I didn't know him as well as many others would. But I don't think he'd want us to be sitting there waiting for the next Frank to turn up necessarily. So whether it's a conductor, whether it's conductors, I don't know. That's something for others to make that judgment on. But from a leadership perspective, you lead where you are. You stand up and you push. Even as a firm, we're leading. We're doing what we can to lead in the business space, because working in conjunction with the chamber, with the committee, with others, to go, no, we Team Geelong, is really important, and having that shared vision of where we want to be, not just who we are. Because talking about Geelong identity, and one of the things that was raised in the business survey we did was a real need for having a brand of who we are, and it was interesting to have those conversations with a few people. It's like, well, who is Geelong? What's our brand as such? How do we represent ourselves? It's like, we can sit here and talk about what we are, but I think the more mature conversation is to talk about who we want to be, and that becomes the brand that we aspire to, that we chase. And so that, for me, is that conversation, I think, is actually starting that kind of working out of, well, who do we want to be? Where do we want to go? What does this place look like in 2050? That's when you start to have that conversation where people are drawn to those conversations.
Just give me 30 seconds. If your business is serious about certification and trust, you need to check out ISO 365. They make ISO compliance simple, practical, and sustainable by building your ISO systems inside the Microsoft 365 tools you already use. No extra software, no hidden license fees, just real control and ownership of your compliance. I love the work that ISO 365 does, because they don't just hand you templates and walk away. They become part of your team as virtual compliance officers, guiding you from gap assessment through to certification and long-term compliance. If you want compliance that actually works for your business and helps you win trust and new contracts, check out ISO 365. And now back to the show. I mean, that just leads me straight into, where do you see us? Where do you see Geelong heading?
I mean, look, one of the really good indicators, and it's one of the few indicators we have of actual planning for 2050, is the state government put in a housing target, and that was part of Plan for Victoria. For Geelong, it was 128,600. For the region, it's almost 150,000 new dwellings. So that, in effect, doubles the size of our region. So it gets us to nearly 700,000 in 25 years' time. Now, we can have lots of debates whether that's a good number, whether it's a feasible number, but I think that it's a good place to start. And so from there, it's pretty. There's areas it's pretty easy to extrapolate. We can sit there and go, right, we've got X amount of basketball courts now. We need X amount of basketball courts then. We've got this many maternal healthcare centres then. Now, how many do we need then? It was interesting. I was talking to a couple of our key. I was talking to Brett Winter from the Port the other day, and I said, "You got a plan for 2050, haven't you?" He said, "Yep." I was talking to Viva, and all these big organisations, they've got plans. They have to think that way. I mean, some of them are playing in a global space. You have to be thinking in that way. So how we actually institute somewhat of a plan for what we look like is a key thing. Our CBD, we've got 3,500 residents there. Maybe it's a bit more now. But our CBD is the same size as Melbourne CBD. And people go, really? And it actually is. It was built on the Hoddle grid. If you go to your Google Maps and trace it out, it is actually the size. Obviously, the volume is vastly different. There's 135,000 people that live in Melbourne CBD. And that was a change that came about 30 years ago. They really started to drive that in. And if anybody remembers Melbourne CBD 30 years ago, you getting a coffee at 5 o'clock on a Friday, there was nobody to serve you coffee because there was nobody to drink the coffee. They'd all gone home. Whereas that's vastly changed as well. So I think, the CBD is a real key focus. But then you talk about that and you go, well, wait a minute. North Lane is the most disadvantaged suburb in Victoria. 70% of our social housing is there. How are we going to make sure that in the 25 years between now and 2050, we don't allow entire communities to be displaced for economic reasons necessarily? How do we keep our communities intact that have been there for some time? And obviously that's an economically challenging thing. But how do we grow enough jobs? How do we grow businesses enough to create the jobs for the people in those areas so we can start to address the systemic disadvantage that some of them have had for generations? And growing up in the suburbs and being a youth worker, I worked with people in that situation at times that had been part of generational disadvantage. And it's very, very hard to put, the old, I'll just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's fine if you've got boots. So, I've in a sense gone as far upstream as I can to see if I can help solve the problem by, how do we grow businesses to create the jobs to actually give them the work to have an outsized change? So how we drive shared prosperity through a growth model is really key. How we deal with housing is key. How we deal with transport is key. All of these things are enablers to allow people to participate fully in society as we grow it here in our community. So I look at this and go, like we talked about, the potential here is insane. It's fantastic. We're an hour from the biggest city in Australia. We've got our own airport. We've got our own port. We've got a thriving business. We can have a whole career in Geelong now almost. Yeah. Which is amazing. I mean, you can come work for one of the biggest professional firms in the world right here. So how do we then make sure that we grow that enough over that time to allow people to go, I don't want to go to Melbourne. I want to actually stay here. But also we drag people and draw people here because of the opportunity that is not just to them, but also to their family, but our community. So that it's a very loose answer. And there's lots of specific instances, but I think that for me, basic indicators like I want to see us have 10 chef's hats Michelin hats in the town. Yeah. In accumulation. Development wise, I want to see 10 cranes in the air because that tells us we're building. Yeah. So it's those type of things that I look at and go, that's where but we need to look at 2050 and go, what does it look like? So what do we need to do now, this week, this year, this next 5 years to get to that point? because otherwise we just wander around looking at your toes. And as we all know, that's not really smart strategy.
Yeah, never works.
No.
And I like it. You actually sort of all those different aspects that you covered basically kind of reinforces the fact that, we do need multiple conductors, right? You need multiple people looking at these things.
Yes.
Having some level of like, we know what 2050 looks like. But like, for example, community housing and Noah Lane, and that's a whole other mindset to growing businesses, isn't it?
Correct. But I think the thing is that, and some people are starting to see that being engaged in the social space is actually at times good business. It's interesting that the biggest employer in Geelong is healthcare and social assistance, and we're almost at 20% last year. I think it's going to be over 20% now, and that's because we've had successive waves of healthcare, aged care, childcare, disability care. So obviously it's a huge employer, and it's a huge employer across Australia as well. But I think it's that type of thing that we're seeing those jobs kind of coming together that, want to propel us to have a more community-orientated feel. So how do we there's lots of money in those jobs too, because we've seen businesses like, Gen U is one of our biggest businesses, and that's a disability care business. And it's not for profit's sake. It's for purpose sake, but there's profit in it as well. I think we need to realise that there is profit to be made by building lots of housing. So how do we help people make a profit, but also draw a community benefit from it as well? I don't think that the mature way to look at it is you can either have community benefit or profit. I think you can have both. And because we take a longer term view at it, why not look at it over a 50-year period? It's interesting, in Vienna they build their public housing, and it's not just public housing; it's apartments built across the board. But they build them, and they take I think it's the city council actually owns the property corporation as such, but they take 50-year loans because they're building it not for the next 10, 15 or 25 years. They're building it for 50 years. But by taking a 50-year loan, they free up capital to build the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. So they help almost drive their own growth. But with an understanding that we are we need to understand the economics of it. Yeah. Too often we think only about the social connections or only about the economics. They are intertwined. So that's a really key thing to keep in mind when we're doing this.
Absolutely. And you mentioned thought leadership.
Yep.
And that phrase gets used quite a bit in many places.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the whole thought, or speaking to cities in the world that are upstream from us.
Yes.
Or they were where we were 20 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
For me, that's real research and real thought leadership. But how much effort goes into sort of going down those effectively rabbit holes around the world, right?
It's
maybe not rabbit holes.
It's not quite rabbit holes.
Yeah.
I think it's very deliberate in a sense. It's interesting, when I wrote the Geelong Economic Blueprint, I was told it was the first time that KPMG had done a locally orientated thought leadership piece ever. Now, I don't know if that's the case, but that's what I was told. So
we'll take it.
We'll take it. And then when Claire and I wrote the Geelong Risk Landscape last year, it just further embedded it. And I think the thing is too, it gives us an opportunity to, certainly looking at when we're doing the thought leadership, it's an opportunity to actually have a real conversation with people that they might not actually ever have anywhere else. And it's not just about the strategic growth of the city. It's actually about the specific growth of their business. And for so many people, an understanding of where the city's going paves the road for the potential growth of their business. If there's no plan for us to actually increase the amount of available staff, it's very hard for someone to invest in the potential of actually bringing on a lot more staff in Geelong. Do they then make the decision 5 to 10 years down the track of, actually, we'll probably need to go to Melbourne? Well, let's try to make sure we don't have that. We want to keep them here. But when you're starting to talk, when you're thinking in this space, and I'm obviously looking at this on a regular basis because I want to be a great resource for my clients and also for my fellow community. When you look at the economics, you start to look around the world and go, well, who's having these problems? Or who's been there? What did they do? What did they do right? What did they do wrong? When I ran Entrepreneurs Geelong, I used to ask this kind of the same 4 questions of everybody I sat in the chair with, which was, where did it all start? Where did you come from? Where are you going? What's next? What went wrong? Which was, everybody wants to talk about failures. It's a key thing. And because that's where the learning is. And what advice would you give? And to some extent, I'm kind of looking at all these cities around the world and going, well, not as an entrepreneur, but as a city, how are we actually talking to those cities and going, okay, where have you been? Where are you going? What went wrong? What lessons have you learned? So I'm kind of doing the same thing there, and hopefully taking lessons that can be for all of us individually, not just even in the business space, but across the board as kind of citizens of the city, but also to allow us to start to think bigger. And, obviously, like I said, what we do at KPMG is help people grow. If people don't have an appetite for growth, it's very hard to encourage them to grow. The person you want to talk to, and I mean, I know you do this in your practice too, you want people to walk and go, right, let's go. I want to grow. Okay, now we can work with that. Because it gets people in motion and allows you to put that small rudder in place, which actually is effectual. If a ship's sitting still, a rudder is useless. So, it's that type of scenario. So the thought leadership is often a thought provoker more than anything.
Yeah.
It's a conversation driver. It's an opportunity to get people thinking about things beyond what they might have otherwise thought about, and also then reflect back into their own personal circumstances. How does that impact me? So it's like in any other business you have or any other story you talk about. I mean, biographies are still one of the most popular types of books because people look and go, oh, he did that or she did that. Maybe I should do that because that might help my circumstance. So it's that type of thing from both a business perspective and also a city perspective. And I think that's why it's important to get views from the outside. We can be really myopic and just look at ourselves. We are not a really good indicator of our own future success if we only look at ourselves. Let's look beyond.
Absolutely. And how do you? I've sat through some of your presentations at KPMG, and it's amazing. Even the economic blueprint, the amount of information in there is so valuable, and like you said, thought provoking. Right? It does make you think. Oh, wow, that'd be great. What if we did that? And what if I was part of that? Or what if I changed this? How do we cascade that down? Because I feel like it hits a certain level of people in Geelong, and then it sort of doesn't. I'm not sure. How does the rest of the community sort of see that, or can they see that? And I don't know. I just feel like there's, the more people that see it, the more people that have this the thoughts being provoked, so to speak.
Yeah,
the more impact we can have for the region. It's
interesting. One of the things I talk about a bit when I'm sitting up there in my office overlooking a lake.
Okay, I really have to have a coffee here now. You've mentioned that view now at least 3 times.
Anyway, but one of the things I talk about, and it's a bit of a leadership concept, I call it horizon management. Okay. Now, when I'm sitting up on level 8, and if we're at level 2, however high you sit up, when you're up there, you can look a long way out. Now, on a good day, I can see Melbourne CBD backlit. I can see Mount Daniel on a good day when it's backlit. I can certainly see Avalon. I can see all the bay. If I go down to down on the ground floor and stand on the street, I probably can't see Avalon. I can see the bay, but I can't see the other side of the bay. I certainly can't see Melbourne. I certainly can't see Mount Daniel. So your height determines your horizon. And in a sense, that thinking is there. Now, the responsibility to some extent is for those of us that can see that far horizon is to be able to chart the path back to where we are. And then when you're having that conversation with someone who's standing on the street to go, not to tell them we're going all the way over there into that far, far, far horizon they can't see, but we're just going down the road. And that's the first point, because we know that's the right direction for the journey we're about to take. So can that type of stuff leak all the way down? Look, there is a mix, okay? There's a point of density of all these conversations. You know, if you want to have a really, really deep economic conversation and have it with, our chief economist, Dr. Brendan Wren, there's not many people can hold that conversation with, or would be interested in it maybe too. But it is he can talk. I mean, he explains it really well, basically, but he can talk at a really, really detailed level. And it's a really important conversation to have, but it's not something we can all have. But there's a responsibility for us to actually leak down and to lead those in those places, to have that. And it's not necessarily you will follow me or anything like that. It's like, hey guys, this is where we're going. And so it's a really important responsibility of leadership, and I think that's responsibility, and business is no different to this. If you've got an apprentice that's just started with you, you don't expect them to come in and chart the cash flow for the next 6 years for you. That's not within their capability. But you just hope that they'll actually fix that pipe in the way that you've taught them. So there is that understanding of how far can we expect people to view. But also, if we want to get that message down to that person, we may have to simplify it so much that it doesn't become as effective. So, for us, we are generally talking to business leaders because they're the people that make that decision. But they can then go, okay, that lesson I can then reflect down into my team or my business or my organisation. And that, because they're responsible for the journey of that organisation, they're the ones that find that the most useful. So that's the concept we've kind of got. Making it ultra popular, there's elements of it that are great. How fast we're growing, all that type of stuff. But the actual implications of that are not necessarily always understood. We've got a big target of 128,000 dwellings. Oh, okay. Do you know how much infrastructure that's going to cost us? What's going to cost us in pipes and all that type of stuff? It's that type of conversation that most people won't. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's a responsibility for us as leaders in every element of our community to be looking at that and going, okay, what's next? What's my responsibility to the people within my care? That I need to make sure that I'm having that responsibility there.
Plays a huge part in, basically how taking, I guess, enabling leaders to lead.
Yes.
Really, and give them direction.
Leaders breed leaders. It's you, for those that are in the sporting context, you look at all the coaches in whatever league you look at, you can often trace that back to 3 or 4 key coaches that were creating leaders. So it's a really interesting in that context. That's sometimes an example people see, but great leaders will promote and push other people to be leaders, not just keep them down. So that's a key.
That's awesome, man. What do you want to achieve in Geelong for yourself, and what do you want to sort of bring to Geelong, and what change do you want to lead? I've asked you 3 questions in one.
Oh, it's kind of
just you and Geelong. But do you know what I mean? Like, I guess it's you're doing this in the with KPMG. That's fantastic. You have an absolute passion for Geelong, which is really addictive.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I guess, where do you see you in the next 10, 20 years?
That's a really interesting question. I think the thing is that the driver is always, for me, is my family. I've got a 17-year-old son. My wife and I have got a 17-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter, 13-year-old daughter. She's 14 in April. But I look at them and I go, are they going to want to live here? Are they going to be able to live here? Are they going to have to be able to find work here? My daughter wants to be a baker and go and spend a year in Paris learning how to bake, and my wife's already decided that she's going over there. So obviously I'm going to be working for a while to fund that particular adventure. And my son is an artist and a creative, and he's a drummer and a musician, and so are we going to have places for him to gig at and all that type of stuff? Is that creative element going to be there? Is my daughter going to come back and run a bakery that is cool and unique, and that people will, will be economically viable as well? Are they going to have somewhere to live? Obviously we've been fortunate to have them at some fantastic. Then there's some fantastic schools in Geelong, and I know that anybody's got kids. I was talking to a friend of mine about just before about one of the schools he's got. The school he's got his kids at, which he went to as well. So we have a great heritage of that. But it's like, how do I create a future for them? Because if I create a great future for them, I'm kind of probably going to help create a bit of a good future for everybody. I suppose. Look, I'm incredibly fortunate to be at a place like KPMG that is such a it's a huge influence and driver in so many areas around the globe, and it's become a place where you can go and really help to have a massive impact in places. So I don't know how long the journey lasts. I hope it lasts for a while. You never know. You never know what's going to happen. But I know I want to be here. In about, I think it was about 2018, 2019, I'd been up in Melbourne in a small consulting firm. I had an office in Geelong, but I wasn't working in Geelong. I was working all over Melbourne, but all over the nation as well. I'd call my wife and say, "I'm sorry, honey, I've got to go to Brisbane next week." There were a few times when I may have called her from Bayswater at 4:30, said, "Sorry, the meeting ran a bit late. I'll be home at some point." So it was at that point, after about 7 years, I just decided I just want to come home. I just want to be home where my family is, and I really want to sink into it. And one of the key drivers for me was I managed to become a part of the Leaders for Geelong program, and spent 2 years doing that, which was fabulous to be able to as much learn about our city and about what goes on behind the scenes in our city as it was to, address the leadership thing, which I'd been doing for many years anyway, but you always learn. But I just want to be a part of creating something. I think that one of the great sayings is, it's amazing what you can get done if you don't need the credit. I kind of don't care as much about the credit these days. I just want to get stuff done. And if I can enable people to do that, if we can help grow some businesses so they employ more people, that's something to put on the gravestone type of thing. So, but, it is about family first and foremost. And then it's about my community. It's my home. Like you, I chose to live here. I know, like I say, I've been here 30 years. I'm almost a local.
What is almost local? But how many years? I thought 25 was. I thought I hit it.
It is really funny we talk about that, because I was talking to a mate of mine who was out in country Victoria, and it's like, yeah, you're not a local here until you've had 4 generations in the dirt. The smaller the town, the longer you need to be there.
Yeah, right.
But I think the thing is, it's like, and I have quite a few people that will come to me. Someone said I should catch up with you. I've just moved to Geelong. Great. Have a coffee. It's like, well, you're in Geelong now. You're part of the team. I know that there's this thing of lifers and that type of stuff, but a third of people in Geelong have been here less than 10 years. About a third, I reckon, are probably people who are born and bred, and then there's the rest of us in the middle. So it's not like the growth has certainly changed the aspect, I think, of what it means to be in Geelong. I don't think we can afford as a city to limit you being, this being your hometown, to the fact that you were born at Baxter House.
Mm.
I think it needs to be more than that. And if I make a decision that I'm going to be somewhere, why can't that mean that I'm part of it? So, yeah, but in terms of the future, look, I just want to keep creating, make this place great. I fully believe in it. I see all the warts, I see all the negatives, and I see all the things we've got to struggle with and all that type of stuff, and that just makes me more excited.
Yeah.
I know it's weird, but that's how I look at it.
That's great. That's great. And I mean, learning, I feel like learning's been something that you prioritize, and you have to.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
It's, for you to become a better leader, you need to continuously learn. And
I'm a university dropout twice.
Yeah.
Yeah. and this is the thing, it's like when you don't understand neurodivergency, sometimes you understand that the whole school system is not set up for you. So I never quite understood it. But that doesn't mean that, and I think the thing is that you need to be a voracious learner. And, I used to read encyclopedias when I was a kid.
Okay.
I loved it because it was just, I can't get enough information.
Like the Britannica?
My mum bought us children's Britannica and the red volumes. They're still in a box somewhere, actually. Quite out of date now, actually.
Probably a tad.
Just a tad. But I would sit there and read them.
Yeah, cool.
Because I had this thirst for information and for insight. And I think that as like I talk to some of our graduate students and that type of stuff, and they go, yeah, I've finished uni. It's like, well, good, you've only just started learning. And I think that's true of anybody. I mean, if you're not learning, then, you're getting out of date by the second. So it's that constant pursuit of knowledge, finding ways to ingest different ways of thinking, different ways of looking. I spend a bit of time in the statistical realm as well because it's great to be able to go, look, I reckon we're growing. But it's much easier for me to say, no, we've got 349,841 people in Geelong as of the last census, so we are growing by 1.98% in the last year. Because not only does it mean that I know what I'm talking about, people actually say, oh, you do know what you're talking about. Although I did run
quite specifically.
Quite specifically. And
you pulled me up on LinkedIn the other day, right? Actually.
But I think that it was a funny story. I had someone standing around. I did pull out one of my economic stats, and I know them all as well. And he goes, "Look, I don't know if that's true, but the way you said it means that I want to believe it."
Yes.
And so there is a responsibility to make sure you're not just making stuff up. But I think that there's that reality. You need to actually understand. If you understand the statistical basis of it, that's a really key way to get the message across too. You need to have that knowledge in all sorts of areas. So that's why I read, I don't know, it's weird, but I read strategies from places like Milwaukee and Leeds and all that type of stuff. I go, how are they doing that? The committee for Melbourne released the latest benchmarking study. That was interesting. You've got stuff coming out of places like Invest Sunshine Coast. You've got and then there's all the stuff that we kind of produce here and elsewhere. And I mean, the amount of stuff I read from KPMG is huge because there's some fantastic insights there. And it all just gets you to the point where you sit and have a conversation with someone and say, actually, I think let's talk about this because this will impact you. So you've got to be constantly learning. You've got to be growing. And that's a personal responsibility that you need to have.
Absolutely. And part of learning is experience.
Yeah.
And winning and failing and things like that, which we all do through our life. But I guess the question there is what's one of the greatest lessons you've had in the leadership space that you'd share?
There's a number. I mean,
I'll take the top three.
Well, look, it's funny. I'd always done leadership. I mean, when you're part of like being in the Salvation Army, being in the church, you are constantly around community. You're constantly around that type of thing. So there was a lot of leadership that happened in terms of leading in a musical context. I would play in a band and I would be the leader of a section and that type of thing. It was probably about 20 years ago or so, when as I said, I started at the church I was at, and I started a media and communications team. So, and I've done graphic design in the past, and I still love doing it because it's about communicating. And so at the time, there was two people that were part of that team as such, and it was when we had the old overheads projector for putting up the words for the choruses that we would sing. So that was the type of thing. Not even data projectors. That was like so cool technology. And we had someone doing a weekly newsletter on an A4
totally
piece of paper.
about that.
Yeah, it's like going old school.
Yeah,
right?
that's awesome.
But I realised that, and there was a lot of stuff that I wanted to do, and so I was driving stuff and doing stuff. There was a point I realised that it's like, I can't do this all myself. I actually have to bring other people with me. And I was attracting some people to come and work with me, and it's like, the realization that I had to actually let go if I was going to lead. The realization that I needed to train and empower and encourage and educate those that were within my team to be able to do these things. The reality that it wasn't going to be done exactly the way I wanted it to. But it kind of really taught me a lesson. It was almost that epiphany moment. It's like, oh, I have to do that. But I absolutely fell in love with it. And, you know, one of the things I would say to anybody that joined my team, and I've done that since in terms of teams that I've run in a few other different places in employment bases, is that when someone starts with me a team, it's like, we share the credit, I own the blame. If something goes wrong, it's on me. And I would say to people, if you make a mistake, then the first thing I'm thinking about is, did I not give you the right training or the right tools, or did I not give you what you needed to do that? What was my responsibility as a leader? What's my responsibility in that place because of that mistake you made? If you make that mistake 3 times and I've helped you, it's not on me anymore, really. But at the same time, understanding, in a sense, I'll call it the mantle of leadership. I know that's a really kind of religiously termed type of thing, but it's about how do I, you know, when you are a leader, it's more about responsibility and ability. And that's a quote from one of my favorite movies, The Core. Anyway, and so understanding that you have a responsibility there is the heaviest thing to carry. But being able to see people grow as you take them through that journey is the most exciting thing to see. And watching that develop, and, you know, leading things like when I led Entrepreneurs Geelong and fully volunteer running 11 breakfasts, which was so much work. You don't ever get rid of the weight of leadership on you, because at the end of the day, it all comes back to you. But it's a weight you want to carry because you want to see other people improve. So if you go into leadership and you're not about helping people to be their best selves, you're not actually in leadership. You're just a manager. So don't confuse the two, which too many people do. But that was one of the key elements for me. And it really is just about, you know, how do I help people to be the best they can be, and give them the freedom to bring their skills to the table too. So I don't know if that's 3 lessons, but that was that really key lesson I learned and applied.
That's an awesome lesson. I love that one. And also because it allows you to then do more.
Yeah.
As a leader. If you're sitting there doing things in the weeds that other people can do and delegate to,
yeah,
that means what else could you be doing?
And I mean, I think the thing is too is that one of the aims I've always tried to have, and I didn't quite achieve it in a number of places, and it's a really hard thing to do, is as a leader you want to become dispensable.
Yes.
You want to be in a place where you raise others up so that you can actually step away and the thing still runs. Now, I mean, I know we talk about it in the business context a lot. You know, you're not really running your business, or you're not really, you know, growing a business until you can walk away and the whole thing doesn't fall apart in the first 3 days. But at the same time, as a leader, it's the same thing as well. You know, and I'm a military historian. I love my military history. I ran a military history group for about 10 years as well.
What? That was not in my list.
It's not on your list. No. And I've got a vial of sand from Omaha Beach.
No.
That's one of my great treasured possessions when I went and visited there. It's about 25 years ago. But in the military context, everybody's taught the job of the person above them. Because, and obviously it's a bit different in normal business as it is in the military, but in the military, if all of a sudden that leader goes down, you've got to be able to step up very quickly and assume that leadership. And sometimes successively and sometimes big leaps. And, you know, I look at the military leadership thing as it's kind of the cauldron of leadership as such. It's where the most difficult leadership happens, because it's life or death. And you know, look, at KPMG, we don't really operate in life and death, as in 99.9% of businesses don't really operate that way. You know, what we do today probably won't kill someone. So it's really that aim of understanding that leadership context, because, okay, well, how does that apply to me? how does that strategic thinking apply? One of my great idols is Eisenhower, and he talks about the fact that plans are useless, planning is essential. The plans will get out of date the minute you kind of publish them. And so as much as the thought leadership is there, it's about the thought leadership beyond that. It's about, have I changed your thinking enough? It's not about, seeing this as something I'll continue to come back to. I want the blueprint to be looked as a great idea for that point, and there are lessons that resonate, but we've moved beyond it. I want to keep moving beyond that thought leadership to look at the next thing. Yeah. How do we look at that? And so, that leadership is really key to keep doing that. And one of my other idols, George Washington. It's a great book by Ron Kerner, his biography. I like to read books, but I only read until I find the one thing I need. Generally, that's the first chapter, thankfully. And then I kind of lose interest sometimes. Unfortunately, the lesson from the Ron Chernow book came on the last page. So I read the whole thing. But it talked about...
Spoiler alert.
But it talked about George Washington being a great general because he was great between the battles, not just in the battles. Mm. I thought it's a really interesting lesson that often we look at people and they're great in a crisis, but can they just get the normal done?
Because sometimes the normal's
that's the hard yards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's I take some of that military stuff and apply that in terms of the leadership lessons I have. But it's always got to be with a heart for the people. It's always got to be, I want to make these people great. Yeah. So I look at some of our grads and our young guys and go, what do you need? I'll razz you, but that's fine. I want to see you become great. Yeah.
That's brilliant. What are we working on next? Can we talk about it?
Oh, we can talk a bit about it. Yeah,
okay.
The next thought leadership piece, I'm literally in the middle of researching at the moment. I'm on the real tail end of it. So it's going to be launched in about a month and a half, which means I have to write it between now and then. I have got started on it, so something. So we're looking at a new piece called the Geelong Growth Horizon. How do we grow our businesses beyond our region? Now, I've said that it's growing business beyond our region because if you start to say, oh, we want to help you export, 98% of businesses turn off immediately. And it's not about that. I mean, I think people think export is, how am I going to sell to London? When some of the best exporting is done to Ballarat and Bendigo and Melbourne. Yeah. So, it's basically how do I, and from a purely business perspective, how do I find a way to increase the size of my market and from a geographic perspective? Because, there's many factors in how you grow your business in a market context. Yes, you can widen your market positioning. You can sometimes go, I'm going to really narrow it, be specialised. But growing your market beyond just, say, the boundaries of Geelong is one really good way to actually help people access a bigger market. Now, that might just be Ballarat. It might be Brisbane. For some people, it might be Boston. Most of the time, that just becomes somewhat of a shipping problem. It's actually, once you get past the thinking, that's a bit of a change. And I'm not negating the fact there's a lot of work to do with that, transfer pricing and all that fun stuff, which we actually have specialists in that at KPMG. Anyway, no plug there. But it's really about looking at how do we start to think beyond, how do we get businesses to start to kind of lift their eyes up to that next horizon as such. To see the potential, the opportunities, to start to just merely ask the question to some extent, which is the great way to start. What if we could sell there? What if that could be our market? We're not necessarily there to say, you must do that. But I think the thing is we need to raise that question for people. What if? And, their own, appetite, their own drive, their own capability, their own capacity will be a determinant of whether they take that journey. But I think just making sure people have an understanding of what that journey is. So the first thing is about, in a sense, how do we grow a business, or how to give business the opportunity to grow. The second element of is, in a sense, how do we as a region get ourselves ready for that growth and also ready for investment? I think the thing is, a lot of people think that when we talk about investment from outside, it's it's only to buy houses. And it's, and that's important. Absolutely. It's important to have investment into real estate, into infrastructure, into industrial, all that type of stuff. It's also important to see investment into business as well, which is it's a very different type of thought process, but it's having a look around the world and go, well, how are they doing it? What's actually working? I'm hearing a lot from people in especially Europe, but also in the US and North America about the fact that foreign direct investment is actually falling. It's harder to get. But I'm wondering if it's harder for them or if it's harder for everyone.
Yeah.
So is that something that might be beneficial for us? So this piece is really starting to explore that concept to kind of go, hey, for all of us, not just those in business, but those of us that are working to help businesses grow, let's just all lift our eyes just that little bit to see the next horizon. And so that's what this is. And we've talked to a lot of businesses. We did a survey. We ran a business insights forum with a number of businesses here. I've talked to people around Australia and around the world to put that together. So it'll be really interesting to see the conclusions that come out of that. And just again, I suppose I want people to keep falling back in love with the potential of what we have and the reality of what we are. And the more we do that, I think the better it is for everybody in our community, not just business, but beyond that. So, again, it's really exciting to have those conversations with people. It's really exciting to come back here and talk to people about it. Even more so when I actually know I'm actually going to what the conclusions are.
That's cool. I'm really looking forward to it. And if someone's listened to this and wants to find out more about this, what's the best way?
The best way, I mean, you can search Geelong Economic Blueprint or Geelong Growth, Geelong Risk Landscape. Both of those are online. We've actually got it. It's funny because I've done we've done quite a few pieces. Our marketing team just decided to set up a page for me for Geelong Thought Leadership, which was fantastic.
That's awesome.
I think it made it easier for them, but it also it also helps because we are looking at the economics of the area and understanding what's growing, what's not, and that type of thing as well. And it's important for people just to I think it's a good thing to read about, but it's a better thing to talk about. It's a better thing to have a conversation about it. What does that mean?
Yeah, I love it. I can't let you go without asking a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
We both love Geelong.
Yep.
What are some of your favourite places in Geelong to relax, grab a coffee or grab a meal? I need to know. I need to know one local to another.
Look, coffee-wise, I got a few. I do love Cafe Go.
Yes. On Bellarine Street.
I do love Cafe Go. Fuel's always been good. Neck of the Woods. Box Office has always been a favourite in Paco.
Yeah, Paco, that's awesome. And what's the coffee at Fuel at my neck of the woods? It's like Campari?
Yes, I think it's Campari. Yeah,
such good coffee.
So, and look, I think it's funny. Keith Fagg, who was our first directly elected mayor, did tell me at one point that he'd seen a stat that we had we had the second most cafes in the world per head of population. Now that was pre-pandemic, so, and I've not seen it. I haven't been able to confirm or deny that. So, but we are very, very blessed in that having those.
We are absolutely.
It's funny. We had a bit of an exercise in our office not long after we moved in. I decided to make it a monthly thing to find the best of. So in walking distance from the office. So one of the things was, where's the best banh mi, we think.
Oh, where is it?
So we like the Vietnamese bakery just opposite the bus stops. I'm trying to remember what it's called. That's terrible. But we went out and we all got different banh mi's and came back and actually rated them. It's very, very scientific. It's an accounting firm, so you can imagine.
There was a chart.
There was a chart. But look, there's some really good spots. Some good Indian restaurants around too. I'm trying to remember the name of the Thai restaurant near Officeworks. Oh, I forgot that off the top.
Yeah, I've been there too.
That's a good one.
Yes.
But then it's that classic thing. It's funny. We're in Leopold. That's where we live, and we have a drive-through fish and chip shop.
Oh yeah, Oppies.
Opsies.
Yeah, Opsies. That's
Yeah.
it. And Chopsies as well.
And Chopsies is there as well. That's run by the sister of the brother that runs Opsies, although they've sold that year since. But we like Chopsies too. But yeah, it's that type of thing that's great. And I mean, we're only just coming out of the fact that we've got a 13-year-old we can leave at home, so we're actually going. Oh, we can actually go out and eat now.
That's cool. Yeah.
But we do love Recess Bar. That's absolutely fabulous.
Yes.
Because my wife's gluten-free and all sorts of things. So that's a place we can go. We don't have to think about, Arborist is great. Mavs is fantastic. Love going to Drunken as well for the dumplings. That's in Little Paco.
Yes.
Cartel's always good for coffee too. And the great South American place as well too. So, and Smash Burgers if you're really feeling like I don't want to run. I have to go for a run after it, but
I know. I mean, we are spoiled for choice. I mean, especially looking back where it was to where we're now. Like we're rattling off a bunch, and we're probably missing dozens more.
Oh, there's so many more. I mean, you can go about King of the Castle in the top of Paco, and you can talk about a few places there. You can even talk about there's a couple of really cool places in High Street and Belmont that I haven't got to as much, but I used to go. There was a great spud place there actually when I worked down there.
Yeah, opposite the Coles.
Yeah, that was really good. Anyway, so there's so many places, and then you look out in the peninsula, and I'm trying to remember the bakery just out behind Mitre 10 in Wellington.
Yes.
Oh, I can't remember that. Anyway, that's fantastic. A couple of good places in Ocean Grove as well. Garage is a great coffee place in Ocean Grove on the way in. There's just lots.
There's lots.
This is the thing is, someone said to me, "Oh, are you going away for Christmas?" It's like, well, I am in the holiday house. That's where I live.
That's so true. We did that this year. We stayed and we went to different parts of Geelong and down the Bellarine and down the coast. And you're like, we're so lucky to be here.
And I'm not paying $1,000 a night, which is great. So
that's it.
But it is a fantastic spot, and we're in Leopold, right in the middle of the Bellarine. So we can pop up to Drysdale, and I was talking to someone before about. My wife and I popped up to Drysdale, had a walk, and then went to the bakery there. Only just found a seat, I got to say.
Yeah, right.
It was bedlam, but it's fantastic. And then we'll go to Ocean Grove or
Port Arlington Beach.
Port Arlington Beach.
It's just unreal.
It's just it's a really amazing part of the world.
Absolutely,
it's our part of the world.
It is.
Yeah,
and that's probably a great way to stop. But thank you so much, Matt. It's been so good to chat to you. As I hit the mics. Thank you so much, and really looking forward to find out, what's coming up in the future and keep it in touch. But thanks so much for coming on.
Not a problem. Thanks, mate.
Cheers.